everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to Lucy Buxton from the Manx Deaf Society. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. It's nice to be here.
So how's your day been?
I've had quite a good day today. Today my hours are shifted, so instead of doing the standard 9 to 5, I am on a 12:30 to 8:30 because we've got some groups coming in this evening. So your interview time has fitted in very well with that.
Oh, right, that's good. So to begin with, can you please tell me a bit about the history of the Deaf Society?
I can. Well, the Manx Deaf Society was founded back in the late 1920s, so we're getting on for almost 100 years ago. And it was set up to support the profoundly deaf sign language users here on the Isle of Man. And it continued to do that for many years until probably about 2014, when we started to look at whether there were any other people or any other groups on the island that we could actually look to support. And the committee at the time realised that actually people like myself who have hearing loss but weren't sign language users were also in need of some support. So we broadened our remit, and now we look to support anyone with any degree of hearing loss here on the Isle of Man, whether you use sign language or not.
That's great. And how many members do you have?
We have approximately 60 members on record, so those are on our membership lists. However, you don't have to be a member of the Manx Deaf Society to be able to access our services. So say if your mum started to develop hearing loss and she was a bit concerned and didn't know where to turn, she can come and talk to us and I'll have a chat with her and see if there's anything I can do that can help.
Right, okay. So what is your role within the society?
My official title is the Chief Executive Officer. It's quite a fancy title. I'm the only person who's employed by the Deaf Society, so anybody that contacts the Deaf Society, generally they come to me first, and then I can either spend some time with them or I can direct them towards a volunteer who might be able to help, maybe someone in a similar situation, or I can talk to audiology or put them in touch with other organisations that might be able to help.
Right, okay, so I imagine your role keeps you quite busy then.
It does, and one of the main reasons why I like my job is no 2 days are ever the same. You never know who's going to get in touch, whether someone sends you a text message, a phone call, an email, and you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think you're so right, like having no 2 days the same really makes things interesting, doesn't it?
It does. You know, I know you're still at school, so you've got your timetable of lessons and things that will go on, but within those lessons I'm sure there are different events that take place, and it's never the same thing. So it's not like, okay, well, whenever I go to English, it's going to be we're all going to read this book and that is all it is going to be. You're never quite sure. Your teachers will adapt things for each day, and it's the same with me, as well as being in the office dealing with inquiries that come in. I also teach lip reading classes. I'm having a break from those. We're on a sort of half-term break at the moment. And we have sign language classes and lots of different things that go on. So my day is really quite varied.
Yeah, it definitely sounds it. So I was born blind and I have learning support from the Department of Education's Vision Support Service. If a child was born deaf, what learning options would be available to them in education?
So in the same way that there's the vision support service, there's the hearing support service, which is run by a lady called Rosie Kelly and her team of staff, and they will work with children in schools. We don't have anyone on island to specifically support someone who is being brought up as a sign language user. So we find most children, and it's 9 out of 10 children who are born deaf are born into a hearing family. And lots of those children are offered and will have, well, their parents will accept, an operation called a cochlear implant, which is designed to have little electrodes put into the cochlea of the ear, which, when successful, will enable sounds to be transmitted from the cochlea up to the brain to develop some sort of sense of hearing. For children for whom that works very well. For children that doesn't work for, then that's when possibility the issue of maybe learning British Sign Language or a different language support system like Sign Along might actually come into play. And the hearing support service staff can teach and work with children who use Sign Along. They have some sign language knowledge as well, but we don't have any specific sort of one-to-one support staff in schools who know British Sign Language.
Right, okay. So if someone did want to learn sign language, how would they go about doing this?
I would always say, come and talk to us and see what we can provide. We have introductory courses, which are very short. They're only 5 weeks long, and about 3 hours per session. So 15 hours in total, where you get a very brief introduction to British Sign Language. You learn the basics like the fingerspelling alphabet, simple greetings, how to describe yourself, colours, animals, emotions, all those sorts of things. It just means you can start to describe a little bit and have a very simple conversation. We also offer a level 1 and hopefully a level 2 course. If you want to go higher than that, then it is possible to learn remotely, and there are organisations that do that are based in the UK. We don't currently have anybody on island who can teach a level 1 course or higher. So we work with a brilliant deaf lady in the UK called Aisha, and she does most of her sessions remotely, but then she comes to the island for a couple of sessions to do some face-to-face work and the assessments that need to be done.
Oh, wow, okay. So you mentioned earlier about cochlear implants, and I think most people have heard of them, but are there any common misconceptions surrounding them?
Oh, misconceptions. Wow, that's such a big topic. So the misconception around cochlear implants, and I think hearing aids in general, is that they will give you back full hearing. They don't. Hearing aids will work with the hearing that you have, and they also amplify all sounds, which is why a lot of people who, when they first get hearing aids, can be quite disappointed that they're not hearing the full range of sounds perfectly like they remember that they used to be able to do. The issue with cochlear implants is you do have to sort of reteach the brain. The electrodes that go into the cochlea, they have a much fewer number of electrodes to pick up the sounds than the ear would naturally have in the cochlea. So there is a lot of retraining and work that has to go in with them. Relearning how to hear can be very tricky, and it can be quite difficult and quite daunting for some people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I bet it can. You also mentioned that sometimes cochlear implants don't work. What would happen if it didn't work?
Well, if the cochlear implant isn't working, if for some reason there is another issue, you can't always tell what the exact cause of someone's hearing loss is. When you have a hearing test, it will usually pick up whether it's an issue with the outer or middle ear, or if it's the inner ear being the cochlea, or the neural pathway up to the brain. So sometimes those things can't be fixed or worked with a cochlear implant. So you look at, well, what are the alternatives? So that's when you're falling back on lip reading and possibly sign language.
Right, okay. So what would you say are some of the common misconceptions that people who are deaf or hard of hearing have to deal with?
I'm often told, oh, but you don't look deaf and you don't sound deaf. So are you sure you're deaf? I describe myself as deaf because I find it easier with my hearing loss just to say I'm deaf. Some people like to say that they're hard of hearing. Some people like the term deafened. Some people prefer to say hearing impaired. It is very much a matter of personal choice. But but you don't look deaf is one that I always find slightly strange, because I don't know what a deaf person looks like, because you can't really tell. It's a hidden disability. So that's one of the main ones that I come across.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what, like you said, what would a deaf person actually look like? I mean, sort of relating that to my perspective, like if you said to someone you don't look blind, like I don't know, obviously I have a cane, so I not want to say that I look blind, but you can see that. But for people who don't use a cane and they still have eyes, they don't wear prosthetics, I don't know what a blind person would actually look like.
I know exactly what you mean. With some disabilities, you can see there's obviously a physical aid there. For example, if somebody's in a wheelchair or if they have a pair of crutches, you can easily say, all right, okay, they must have some issues with their mobility. With somebody who has sight loss, yes, you might see that they have a cane or they might have a hearing dog with them. But again, not everybody understands that. And I remember I worked with Sight Matters here on the island a little while ago, and the Road Transport Safety Team. And we did a brilliant bit where I was chatting with Debbie Thompson from Sight Matters about the different sorts of canes that were available. So depending on, it could be a different length or a different ending to the cane. And this was all things that I never knew about. But the one thing I did know was the difference between just a standard white cane and a red and white cane. So the white cane is someone who is blind. Red and white is deaf blind. So somebody who has issues with both their sight and their hearing. And that is quite a good visual cue. But again, you have to know what it means. You might just see someone and just think, oh, they've just decorated their cane.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to be honest. I didn't know that a red and white cane meant that someone was deaf and blind. I was never really aware of that.
But that would be difficult for you to pick up, as
yeah.
you wouldn't necessarily see that.
Yeah, so that's new to me. But yeah, it is interesting about, there are lots of different cane tips that you can get that all help walking across different surfaces. So like, for example, I have a rollerball tip on my cane right now. And it's really handy, but often gets stuck when I'm walking through like grass or sand and I have to use it. And there are lots of different tips you can get that help you to do different things.
Just thinking about that, you're talking about walking along the sand and such like. Something that deaf people often find quite difficult is when someone is approaching them from behind. So they can't necessarily hear that someone is coming up behind them. So you become quite wary of your surroundings and quite sort of visually aware. And it just made me think of a situation where someone was very shocked and surprised to find that a deaf person is allowed to drive.
Oh, right. Okay.
So why would they not be allowed to drive? Well, you can't hear the emergency sirens coming. No, but then you might find that they actually have blue flashing lights on the emergency vehicle, so you might not hear them, but you will see them. And a lot of deaf people, certainly when you have significant hearing loss, you find that your other senses and your sort of peripheral vision can become quite heightened, so you become more aware of your surroundings in that respect.
Yeah, I completely understand what you mean, and it's interesting that you say about people who have significant hearing loss, their senses being heightened, because I find that that's the case for me. So obviously I have no sight whatsoever, but my sense of hearing is heightened, and so is my sense of touch. And again, like, I have to be so aware of my surroundings and who's around me and what I'm doing.
Yes. Do you ever feel anxious or unsure about situations when because I know a lot of deaf people quite often, we've said that you don't look deaf, so it's not necessarily easily seen that someone has hearing loss, so they feel quite insecure sometimes disclosing that they have hearing loss. It makes them feel quite vulnerable. I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
I've had like quite high function anxiety for ages, since I was about 8 or 9, because I'm constantly on edge I'm constantly thinking about what's going to happen next and where I need to be and what's around me. And I very rarely feel relaxed. So I totally get why someone who's deaf would feel the same way.
Is there anything that you do to sort of, calm yourself down or, make yourself a little bit more relaxed? Have you got any strategies that you use?
I mean, I do have coping mechanisms if things get too bad. Like if I go into panic attack stage, then my classic is either deep breaths or count to 10. And I know they seem very simple, but they are honestly really good coping mechanisms. But I'm usually very relaxed when I'm at home. Home is like my safe space. But when I'm out in public, I am always a little bit on edge. But that's just something I sort of learn to deal with.
It is. It's something that you have to take in your stride. And I think it's the same with hearing loss. People, you do learn to adapt to it, but you never totally get past it. There is always that element of, I'm not quite sure. With me, things that make me more stressful is when I have to go into a busy room. Where am I going to sit? Am I going to be able to hear the person that I'm sitting with? Even if I'm, meeting someone for a coffee, am I going to get there first? If they're there first, have they chosen a table in a good position for me, to the side of the room? Or going out for a meal, it can be quite a stressful, anxiety-inducing situation. But there are things that, we can do to try and lessen that to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the accessibility and inclusion issues that deaf or hard of hearing people face on the island?
Okay. I would say, first of all, people being aware of people with hearing loss and the challenges that they face. For me, the period when COVID first appeared on the island and we were in lockdown, lots of shops and places were putting in screens, everybody was wearing masks. That was a really difficult time. And explaining to people that in order to be able to understand what they're saying, say at the supermarket till, or if I was asking where a product was, to be able to understand that was very difficult. So having to adapt to that was quite a significant challenge. Something that the Deaf Society support now is something called the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Lanyard. So if you wear one of these lanyards, it shows that you have some form of hidden disability. It might be hearing loss, sight loss, maybe you have Crohn's disease, maybe you have PTSD or an anxiety issue, but it shows that the people around you that there is something, so that if they then approach you and say, I can see you wearing the lanyard, is there anything I can do to help? You know that the person coming up to you, is supportive and wants to help you, and you can either say, yeah, actually I'm finding this shop really quite stressful because there are just so many people and it's bustling. Can I just leave my trolley and come back for it later? And often shops will do that for you and allow you to come back at a quieter time. I know some supermarkets have also trialled sort of quieter times where they dim the lights slightly, or they don't have the music playing, just to make it a more inclusive environment for people who find busy crowds and the noise quite difficult. As someone with hearing loss, shopping when it's noisy can be an issue because I'm struggling to hear what someone is saying to me at the till. Quite often the checkout assistants want to have a nice little chat with you, they'll, like you did today, how are you? How's your day going? For someone like me, that's actually quite a stressful experience because am I going to hear what they're saying? Have I understood it right? If I answer wrongly, they're going to think, what's up with me? Why have I given such a stupid response? Or they might laugh at me. So a lot of people with hearing loss become quite isolated and withdrawn, and they stop going out. So for the island to become a more positive place and to be more accepting of people with various different disabilities would be great. The provision of hearing loops in premises would also be a good step forward. If you have hearing aids which have a loop program on them, it means that you can hear more clearly the person who's coming over the loop system. They are the ones with the microphone. It can be supermarket shops, banks. It cuts out a lot of that background noise, so it allows your hearing aids to actually amplify the voice rather than all the sounds that are in the environment.
Right, okay. Yeah,
That was
that's
quite a lot,
cool.
I'm sorry.
No, don't worry about it. That's exactly what the podcast's for. But yeah, that's quite cool. I have heard about the sunflower lanyards, like you mentioned earlier, and they are great. I really think they're handy. And I guess it's easier than explaining to people that you have a hidden disability, because people just see that and know what it means and that they might be able to help in some way.
Indeed, that's the point of them, is to make life just a little bit easier, and possibly so that you don't have to keep flagging up to people, I'm struggling to hear, or I can't see where the different products are on your shelf because all these packages look very similar to me. Can you help me find this particular type of baked bean? I don't know. I'm talking off the top of my head now.
No, it's fine. So I believe there is something called the Deaf TT to make TT experiences more accessible for the deaf community. Can you tell me a bit more about this?
This was an idea originally thought up by my husband. We had been away to Italy and his work had actually provided him with 2 tickets to a Formula One race in Italy at Monza. And we went along very excited about this event and what we were going to see. And we found that we couldn't follow anything of what was going on at all. We were in this little stand area. We could see the track, and every now and then a car would whip past and it was very, very noisy, but it was so quick you couldn't see which one it was. There was commentary, but it was Italian, so we couldn't access it that way because neither of us speak Italian at a good enough level to be able to follow that. And when we came back, we were chatting one evening with some of the members of Deaf Club, which is our sign language users club. And, you're looking forward to the TT? No, not really. Well, why not? It's this big event on the island. I can't really watch it. I don't enjoy watching it because I never know what's going on. And if you ask someone, then it's just, I'll talk to you in a minute. And one of our members gave this wonderful story about how when he was growing up and he was a boy, his dad was really into the TT and he'd want to watch it with him, but he'd be always asking, what's happening, who's next, how fast are they going, who's in the lead. And there was no accessibility. So we thought, okay, well, what can we do about this to make this major event here on the island accessible for more people? So we came up with the idea of Deaf TT. And I spent a couple of weekends doing very slow laps of the TT course, safely but slowly, and we'd pull in at various different corners around the island and we'd get out and we'd have a look at what we could see and we'd take photographs. Because in sign language, yes, you can finger spell all the letters of the word that you're wanting to say, but that takes a very long time, because if you imagine having to spellEverything, it takes a very long time. So we looked at the different corners for what we could see, and the members of Deaf Club had a think and they came up with some signs for those corners. So that was the first step towards creating Deaf TT. We then worked with our interpreter who lives in the UK and worked with her to develop those signs so that she became familiar with them. And then come the next TT, she came over to the island. We had some seats in the grandstand, so we had Deaf Club members there sitting, looking at her. She sat in the grandstand with her back to the racetrack, listening via earpods to the radio commentary, and she is interpreting the TT commentary facing our guys in the grandstand. So all of a sudden, they are on an equal with everybody else. So they are up to date with exactly what's happening, who's in the lead, who's catching who up, who's gone past who, and the signs are there to support them with that. So you no longer have to spell out, for example, Mayhill. We use a sign for vampire and a sign for house, because as you go up round the corner at Mayhill, there is a brilliant, beautiful house, but it looks like something out of a Scooby-Doo cartoon, which is a very sort of gothic-y house with sort of, pretend bats and things coming out of it, hence House of the Vampires. So that became Mayhill. So that would give our sign language users accessibility. For someone like me who can't follow the TT commentary because it's too quick, we also introduce captioned racing. So just like you can have a television program and you can have subtitles running at the bottom that you can read, we now have had in the past captioned racing. So you can pull up on the live timings page and you can read the text that's going on there as opposed to having to listen to it.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. And it's so amazing that an event like that is being made more accessible for people.
It is. It puts people on an equal par. So it means that, our guys, instead of having to wait to watch the catch-up commentary, on the television the following day, if they go out and meet some friends that evening, they can chat about the racing that's taken place. They can talk about, how brilliant Michael Dunlop was or wasn't a shame about Lee Johnston or whoever the rider is. They are participating on an equal level. And that is so important. But I do always feel very, very sad for our interpreter because she is the only person who goes to the TT that doesn't actually see the racing because she has to sit with her back to the racetrack facing the grandstand and all the people who are looking at the racetrack and seeing everybody go past.
Oh gosh, yeah. In fact, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I guess she's probably never been able to actually see it, has she?
No, she hasn't. She's never seen a race, bless her.
Oh, maybe she should go one day and just be able to watch it.
I think one year we're going to have to try and do something so that she actually gets to see a race. We usually take time out to walk around the paddock and meet some of the riders. We had a wonderful time this year. We were talking to some of the mechanics in the different tents, making sure that we both understood about the different types of bikes because they changed the format for this year. So it wasn't just the straight senior race on the Friday. We had different races on the Friday and then the senior on the Saturday. So each year is different, so we never ever know quite what's going to come up in the races as well. But we also think it's a world first. We're not aware of BSL interpreted racing or sign language interpreted racing happening anywhere else around the world. But I would be very interested in any of your listeners here to your podcast know of anywhere else where it happens. I'd be very interested to hear about that.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, I haven't heard of anything either, but it's always good to be the first to do something because then people can take inspiration from that.
Indeed, and I would like to think that they would. It is something that we are very, very proud of.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is, and I can definitely see why. So my final question for you, what can people do to help the Manx Deaf Society?
Okay, so we are a charity and we have no government funding. So all our funding for all our services comes from either legacies that people leave us in their wills, investments where we've invested money that people have left us in the past. We do own our premises in Somerset Road, and part of that there is a self-contained flat, so we have some income from that. But fundraising for us is always good. Spreading the word about the Deaf Society is also very helpful because, believe it or not, it takes on average 7 to 10 years for someone to actually address an issue with their hearing. Quite often people put up with it or they put it down to, it's just actors on the television. They don't speak as clearly as they used to. Children today, they mumble, they don't speak clearly. So knowing that there is a society out there that gives you someone to talk to, you have a listening, someone who will sit with you, listen to the issues and challenges that you're having, can sympathise. As someone who wears hearing aids myself, I understand a lot of the frustrations of hearing aids. I understand why a lot of people, once they're finally prescribed them, actually choose not to wear them because they can be uncomfortable, they can be itchy, and it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes when you've lived for quite some time without having full hearing and then you're given a pair of hearing aids. Suddenly you're hearing sounds that you haven't heard for some time, and it can actually cause some people quite a lot of sadness when they realise all the things that they have been missing. So you almost grieve the hearing that you haven't had. Also, they amplify all sounds, so there is that adjustment and just that managing of expectations for some people. So to get the word out about the Deaf Society would also be really helpful, which is another reason why I'm so grateful that you invited me along to have a chat with you today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming. I know that you're very busy, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and talk to me.
You are very welcome. It's been a delight meeting you again, because I remember you at the Circus Skills workshop up at Sight Matters, and it's always nice to meet new people.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's been so lovely to meet you. And thank you to my audience for listening, and I will see you all next time.